I, 32 male, moved to the US when I was 19. I arrived with a single suitcase, heavily accented English, and an intense drive to build a life. English is my third language, following my native Eastern European tongue and German. Over the years, I worked brutal hours in construction, took night classes, and eventually founded a mid-sized logistics company. By the time I was 28, I bought a 4-bedroom house completely in my own name. 3 years ago, I met my fiancée, 29F. At first, she seemed entirely supportive. She loved my work ethic and constantly praised what I had built. We got engaged 6 months ago. Almost immediately after the ring went on her finger, the dynamics shifted. Her family, specifically fiancé's mother and fiancé's father, started treating my house like a free resort. They would come over unannounced, drink my expensive liquor, and make passive-aggressive comments about how my home needed to be remodeled to fit their standard before the wedding. The breaking point happened 2 weeks ago. I took fiancé's mother, and fiancé's father to a very high-end restaurant to celebrate fiancé's promotion at work. I was paying as always. The atmosphere was tense from the start. Fiancé's father kept ordering top-shelf scotch and making subtle jabs about how immigrants are taking over local businesses. I ignored it to keep the peace. When the waiter came for our food orders, I asked a question about a specific cut of steak. Because I was tired, my accent was slightly thicker than usual. I tripped over the pronunciation of a French culinary term. Fiancée slammed her menu down on the table. She rolled her eyes, let out a loud, exaggerated sigh, and looked right at me. "Your accent is so embarrassing," she said, her voice easily carrying to the adjacent tables. "Can you just talk normal? You've been here long enough. It's exhausting translating for you." The table went dead silent. The waiter froze, his pen hovering over his notepad. Fiancé's mother smirked behind her water glass. I stared at the woman I was supposed to marry. A sudden, absolute clarity washed over me. All the subtle disrespect, the financial entitlement, the casual cruelty, it all snapped into focus. I looked her dead in the eyes. I dropped my accent completely, speaking in crisp, unaccented, perfect American English. "I'll work on it," I said. Then, I turned to the waiter. I switched entirely to my native language. I ordered my steak, specified the exact temperature, selected a side dish, and asked for a fresh glass of water, all in a language no one else at the table understood. The waiter, completely lost, just blinked. I smiled, pointed to the menu items I wanted, and nodded. Then I turned back to my fiancée and her parents. For the next 20 minutes, I did not speak a single word of English. When fiancée demanded to know what I was doing, I replied in my native tongue. When fiancé's father angrily told me to stop playing games, I offered him a polite, thoroughly Eastern European proverb about ignorant guests, completely in my language. Fiancé's face turned blotchy and red. She realized she couldn't understand a single word. The tables around us were openly staring now. The humiliation she tried to inflict on me had instantly boomeranged back onto her. When the food arrived, I stood up. I walked over to the waiter, handed him a $100 bill in perfect English to cover my specific meal and my time, and walked out the front door. I left them sitting there with a massive bill of expensive scotch and appetizers. Message 2. I drove home, packed her loose items into garbage bags, and left them by the front door. I wasn't just angry. I was entirely done. She arrived an hour later, absolutely furious. She kicked the door open and started screaming about how I abandoned them, how her father had to max out his credit card to pay the bill, and how I humiliated her in public. I sat on the couch, perfectly calm. "The wedding is canceled," I told her. "We are done. I want you out of my house by the end of the weekend." Her anger instantly morphed into a smug, mocking smile. She crossed her arms. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house too. We've been living together for 2 years. We are common law married. If you want me out, you have to buy me out. I want half the equity." She was incredibly confident in this. Unfortunately for her, she had confused internet rumors with actual state law. While our state does recognize common law marriage, The legal requirement explicitly demands that both parties agree to be married and hold themselves out to the public as husband and wife. An engagement ring is legal proof that a couple intends to be married in the future, entirely negating a common-law marriage claim. I didn't bother explaining this to her. I just went in my guest bedroom and locked the door. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer. I explained the situation. My lawyer confirmed she had absolutely no claim to my property, which was bought prior to the relationship and funded solely by me. Because she paid no rent and we had no lease, she was classified legally as a tenant at will. My lawyer drafted a formal 30-day notice to vacate, the exact legal requirement in our state before filing a forcible detainer suit, commonly known as an eviction. I handed her the notice that evening. She looked at the legal header, scoffed, and tore it in half. The next day, the real dirty tricks began. Fiancée's father showed up at my house while I was working in my home office. He bypassed the doorbell and walked right in, using the key Fiancée gave him. He stood in my doorway, trying to physically intimidate me. "You're not kicking my daughter out onto the street," he demanded. "You wasted her youth. You owe us. You're going to write a check for $100,000 right now, or I am going to make your life a living hell. We will ruin your business. We will ruin your reputation." I simply picked up my phone, dialed the police non-emergency line, and reported a trespasser. He spat on my floor and walked out before they arrived. I immediately had a locksmith change all the exterior locks and disabled the garage keypad. They realized I was not going to be intimidated. So, they decided to escalate to a strategy that is as common as it is destructive. They decided to use the legal system as a weapon. Message 3. A week later, I was sitting in my living room when 2 police officers knocked on my door. They weren't there for a casual chat. They handed me a stack of papers. It was an emergency ex parte temporary protective order. Fiancée had gone to a judge, entirely behind my back, and filed a sworn affidavit claiming that I had physically assaulted her, threatened her with a kitchen knife, and explicitly stated I was going to kill her. Because the system is designed to err on the side of caution to protect potential victims of domestic violence, the judge granted the temporary order immediately based solely on her written word. The officers gave me 10 minutes to pack a bag. I was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of my own home, my own business, or my fiancé. If I refused to leave, I would be arrested on the spot. I packed my bag in silence. I saw Fiancée standing at the end of the hallway. She had a faint, artificial bruise on her cheek. She was smiling, a cold, victorious smirk. She had the house. She thought she had all the leverage. I checked into a hotel and immediately called my lawyer. He was furious but focused. "This is standard procedure for a temporary order," he explained. "They give it out like candy to prevent immediate harm. But there has to be a final hearing within 14 days where she actually has to prove it. We prepare for war." What Fiancée didn't know, what she fundamentally failed to understand about the man she was trying to destroy, was that I am a meticulous person. 3 days before the police showed up, I had noticed a severe shift in the atmosphere of the house. Fiancée and Fiancée's mother were constantly having hushed conversations, stopping abruptly the second I walked into a room. Our state is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. This means that as long as one person in a conversation consents to the recording, it is perfectly legal. Furthermore, recording in the common areas of your own home, where there is no reasonable expectation of absolute privacy from a homeowner, is heavily protected. Knowing they were plotting something, I took an old iPad, set it to record voice memos, and slid it under the sofa in the living room before I left for work. I left it running for 9 hours. When I retrieved it that night and listened to the audio with headphones, I hit the jackpot. I had a crystal-clear, 40-minute recording of Fiancée and Fiancée's mother sitting in my living room, drafting their fraudulent legal strategy. On the recording, Fiancée's mother says, "You need to say he had a weapon." They always grant the immediate order if there's a weapon. Say it was the large chef's knife. Fiancée replies, "Should I put a bruise on my face? I can use the edge of the coffee table." Fiancée's mother responds, "Yes, a small one. Take pictures immediately." Once the police force him out, we change the locks. He'll be so desperate to keep his business reputation clean and stay out of jail, he'll sign the house over to you just to drop the charges. It was a conspiracy to commit perjury, file a false police report, and extort me. And I had it all in high-definition audio. I didn't tell the police. I didn't text her. I gave the digital file directly to my lawyer. We decided to let her walk right into the trap. We needed her to lock herself into the lie under oath in a court of law. Message 4. The day of the final protective order hearing arrived. The courtroom was small, tense, and smelled of old wood and floor wax. Fiancée sat at the applicant's table with her legal aid attorney, looking perfectly fragile. Fiancée's mother and Fiancée's father sat in the gallery, glaring at me. Fiancée took the stand. She swore an oath to tell the truth. Then she cried. She put on a masterclass performance. She testified that I became enraged over a dinner dispute, cornered her in the kitchen, shoved her into the counter, and held a knife to her throat. She pointed to the faint bruise on her cheek, immortalized in police photos, as evidence. Her attorney rested the case. My lawyer stood up. He walked to the podium. He didn't ask her about the knife. He didn't ask her about the shove. Ma'am, my lawyer asked, his voice calm. Just to be absolutely clear for the record, you are testifying under oath that the events you just described are entirely true and that you did not fabricate this assault to gain leverage in a property dispute. Yes, Fiancée sobbed. It's all true. And you never discussed fabricating an assault with your mother in the living room of my client's home on the afternoon of the 12th. Fiancée froze. The color drained from her face. She glanced at her mother in the gallery. No. I don't know what you're talking about. My lawyer turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense offers into evidence Defense Exhibit A, a legally obtained audio recording from the residence. The judge allowed it. My lawyer plugged his laptop into the courtroom speakers. The audio filled the quiet room. Fiancée's mother's voice echoed loudly. You need to say he had a weapon. They always grant the immediate order if there's a weapon. Followed by Fiancée's voice. Should I put a bruise on my face? I can use the edge of the coffee table. The silence in the courtroom following the recording was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Fiancée's attorney literally pushed his chair away from her at the table, visually distancing himself from his own client. Fiancée's father stared at the floor. Fiancée's mother looked like she was going to be sick. The judge leaned forward, removing his glasses. His face was a mask of absolute fury. Protective order dismissed, the judge barked, slamming his gavel. He pointed a finger directly at Fiancée. Ma'am, you have just committed perjury in my courtroom. You have weaponized a system designed to protect actual victims of abuse. The judge immediately referred the matter to the district attorney's office. Under our state law, perjury committed during an official proceeding with the intent to deceive is aggravated perjury. It is a third-degree felony. The fallout was catastrophic for them. Because the protective order was dismissed, I was legally allowed back in my house. My lawyer informed her attorney that if she was not out of the house in 2 hours, we would proceed with a formal eviction and add a civil suit for property damage. She fled before I even arrived, leaving half her clothes behind. But I wasn't finished. During the financial audit my lawyer ran to ensure she hadn't opened credit cards in my name, we found something else. The joint bank account I had funded with $30,000 for wedding vendors was completely drained. She hadn't paid a single vendor. She had been transferring the money in small increments to Fiancée's father's failing construction business for the past 4 months. I filed a civil suit for conversion and civil theft against all 3 of them. 2 weeks later, Fiancée was arrested at her new apartment for aggravated perjury and filing a false report to a peace officer. She is currently awaiting trial and facing potential prison time. Her father's business collapsed under the weight of my lawsuit, and they are drowning in legal fees trying to keep their daughter out of a state penitentiary. I have my house back. I have my peace back. I speak whichever language I choose, whenever I choose. And the only people who are exhausted now are her parents, trying to figure out how to pay back the money they stole. Sometimes, the best response to an entitled demand isn't an argument. It's just letting them build their own trap and handing them the shovel to dig it deeper. If you enjoyed watching entitled people face the absolute legal consequences of their own terrible decisions, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time someone tries to mess with the wrong immigrant.